Hello, Indivisibles. I see folks are starting to join this evening. It is great to be here with you. If I could have folks, as you are joining, go ahead and pop in the chat box your name, where you are calling from, and maybe something that's really sticking with you or revving you up about the convention, the Indivisible convention so far, something you've learned or you're wrestling with. Let's hear it in the chat box. And if that's too much, just your name and where you're coming in from. All right, Scottsdale, I'm assuming that's Arizona, Boston. I see some California, Oakland, Denver, Florida, Texas, Georgia, Auburn, Colorado, California, Cranberry, New Jersey, Lambertville, New Jersey, Northern Arizona, Flagstaff, Colorado, it's coming too fast, New Orleans, Florence in Oregon. Let's see, Albuquerque, Berkeley, Brooklyn, Colorado, Wisconsin, Illinois. Okay, Montgomery County, Maryland. That is my home county. My mom's Indivisible group. So hey, Clarion County, Pennsylvania, Bucks County. All right, and folks, again, if you are just joining, please go ahead and pop your name and your Indivisible group or where you're coming from in the chat box, and so that we can all get introduced and say hello. All right, let's see. I see Bethlehem, New York. I see Moore, Arizona, Western North Carolina, Williamsburg, Virginia. Let's see, Albuquerque, Georgia, District 10, Chicago, Scottsdale. Got a full Scottsdale crowd in the audience tonight. That is awesome. Sacramento, St. Croix Valley, Minnesota, Afton, Indivisible in Minnesota, Necessary Trouble in Georgia, DeKalb, Illinois, Philadelphia, Frederick. Oh my goodness, we have got a crowd joining tonight. Phoenix. Wonderful. We have got some great folks here tonight. We have a full representation from across the country, and it is such a pleasure to be here with you. Now, I am going to go ahead and kick off with a little bit of an introduction, some housekeeping. For folks who have not met me, I am Leah Greenberg. I am the co-executive director of Indivisible. I am thrilled to be here with you this evening. It has been an incredible, energizing convention these last 2 nights, and I'm so excited to close it out with another kick-ass night of stellar programming, learning, and strategizing. So in a few moments, we are going to hear from some amazing partners about their work. Later on, we're going to create some spaces for sharing directly and exchanging with each other. First, I'm going to start with a couple housekeeping notes. You all have probably noticed we are on a new platform. If you've been to our previous events, we're on a new platform, Zoom Events. We have crafted a one-pager for folks if you would like to have it, or if you have any questions, you want to learn more about Zoom Events, it's going to be dropped in the chat and it's going to be emailed out to participants beforehand, so you should have that. We actually switched platforms because we had gotten feedback from you that our former virtual platform was not super user-friendly and particularly had bandwidth issues for folks who had not great internet connections. So we wanted to make this more accessible. It runs just like regular Zoom with one flag. Zoom Events does not love the Safari browser, so we suggest that you either use the Zoom app or Google Chrome. We found over the last few days that if you are using Safari and you are watching something like the panel we're about to have, it might pin the wrong window, so definitely switch on over to Chrome if you can. And if you have trouble seeing all the panelists tonight, you can also join us from the lobby where we will be live streaming this session. Closed captioning is also available in the lobby. So if you hit the exit to lobby button, then you can get it for this session, and then it's available through all of the other sessions inside of the actual meeting throughout the night. And finally, each session is going to be recorded, and we're going to send out the follow-up materials later next week from the entire convention. So don't worry, you're not going to miss anything. Finally, if anyone needs assistance, we do have our help desk open throughout the evening. That's again, if you go into the lobby, you'll see a chat box, and folks from our team will be happy to help you figure out which room you're supposed to be in or any tech issues. With that, I see the chat box has kept going. That is great. Welcome everybody who is coming in. I am gonna turn it over. I'm going to switch on over to our panel. I am so excited to welcome a couple of really extraordinary women leaders to be with us tonight. Now, when we were thinking about, how were we going to construct this event? What were we going to talk about? What were we going to focus on? We knew that one thing that we needed to create a lot of space to think about and hear from leaders around was the end of Roe. The striking down of Roe by a majority of right-wing hacks on the Supreme Court a little over 2 weeks ago. We know that you and probably everybody who is joining tonight is still processing this, still going through the stages of grief. Personally, I have been in the anger phase for the last few weeks. I'm planning to stay there for a while. It's a sort of a productive anger. And we're also just still beginning to process the devastating implications that this is going to have for people around the country and the ways in which it is connected to a broader degradation of our democracy, of our rights, of our freedoms. So with all of that said, Indivisible, we are a group of people that is about taking anger and taking fear and taking outrage and turning it into action and community and supporting each other. So I would love if you all would go ahead just to greet our speakers, maybe just pop in the chat box if you have done something in the last few months around Roe, around abortion rights in your state, around electoralizing that and making Republicans pay for it. Please just pop it in the box so that we can see the real breadth of what folks have already started to do. All right, I see marching. All right, I see marching. All right. Well, while the chat box is going, I am going to go ahead and start introducing our incredible speakers. So first, Heather Booth is one of the country's leading strategists around progressive issue campaigns and elections. She is an organizing legend. She started organizing in the civil rights and women's movements in the 1960s. She started Jane, an underground abortion service, in 1965 before Roe. You can learn more about that via the new HBO documentary called The Janes, as well as a forthcoming Hollywood film version of the story called Jane. She was also the founding director and is now president of the Midwest Academy, a training which trains social justice leaders and organizers, and a member of the consulting firm Democracy Partners. She has been at the center of the fight for progressive change and electoral wins for decades, from serving on multiple presidential campaigns to playing pivotal roles in a wide range of crucial battles, from immigration reform to healthcare reform to financial reform and establishing the CFPB, to the battle for marriage equality, to most recently helping to elect the Biden-Harris ticket. Finally, you can also learn more about her life in the organizing world in the incredible documentary Heather Booth Changing the World, which has been shown on PBS and I believe is available on whatever streaming service you are currently using. I also want to introduce Kelly Robinson. Kelly Robinson is the executive director of Planned Parenthood Action Fund. She previously served as the national organizing director for the Action Fund and Planned Parenthood Federation of America. Kelly has been a crucial leader as everything has been under threat over the last few years. She has been emerged as a key leader in driving Planned Parenthood strategy, its vision for supporter engagement and organizing. She served as the lead strategist for I Stand with Planned Parenthood and Pink Out national mobilizations. She created Path to Power, the organization's grassroots training program. She developed constituency programs, and she most recently led the largest electoral program in Planned Parenthood Action Fund's history. Outside of Planned Parenthood, Kelly served as the former board chair of SisterSong, the largest national women of color reproductive justice collective. She also currently sits on the board of the Women's March, and she has recently added to her titles the role of mom to her incredibly adorable baby boy, Isaiah. Folks, thank you so much for joining us here tonight. And if we could all give a warm welcome to our speakers. I am going to kick off by asking, Heather, if you could just give a little bit of an opening introduction, a review of the moment we're in. You've been active in this space for a long time. You know what it was like before Roe. If you could talk to our folks about what does that look like for you and what do you think people should be thinking about in this moment?
Well, I first want to say I love being with my movement sisters and the movement champions, Leah Greenberg and Kelly Robinson. You know, Kelly trained me at an early Planned Parenthood event. I've been better off because of my relationship with her, and indivisible. And Leah, what you provide in the movement is, it is both indivisible and irreplaceable. And you, by providing not only this wonderful summit, but also by the tools you provide, you are allowing people to take action and to move it into elections. And the link you've got on givenoground.org. By the end of this program, everyone should be signing up, taking shifts, and moving on. And the main lesson that I want to share for this group, and the wonderful people listening in, and your numbers magnified, is the lesson you know, which is, if we organize, we can change this world. You are the people who have been changing this world, and we can change this world when we organize, and we need to. Right now, we are on a knife's edge about the future in this country, really between democracy and tyranny. And it's very challenging, maybe the most challenging time I remember in my lifetime. On the one hand, it's a pushback on all the advances we've made over the last 50 years, certainly on reproductive freedom, the most intimate decision in a person's life about when or whether or with whom we have a child. And if 1 in 5 people now will have an abortion, and it used to, by the way, be 1 in 4, and it was 1 in 3 before that, until there was more, both contraception and then more bans. 1 in 5, that means it could be your sister, your friend. It could have been your mother or your grandmother. The majority of people who have abortions already have a child, so they know what it means to bring a child into this world. But the pushback is beyond that. It's on all of our freedoms. It's about not having adequate, sensible gun laws, about voting rights itself, about this criminal conspiracy attack on the country. And it's dispiriting. On the other hand, there is a chance for greater democracy we've ever had. And one of the lessons I've learned is often it is the moment of greatest challenge that we make the greatest progress. But that's up to us if we organize. We should remember that we had 81 million votes for Joe Biden, and we had 7.1 million more for Biden than we had for Trump. And a year before the election, people thought Trump would win. And 2 more senators, and we hold the House, and we can codify Roe, overturn the filibuster, and leave it open for changing many other things that we want to see, more of our dreams, but only if we organize. And this is what's up to us. I learned this first when I was in the civil rights movement. In 1964, I went to Mississippi in the Freedom Summer Project that many of you have heard about. And it's where Northern students were recruited to support very courageous African Americans in Mississippi who were simply trying to get the freedom to vote. And the Summer Project had notoriety when 3 of the young volunteers, Andrew Goodman, James Chaney, and Michael Schwerner, were killed at the hands of the Klan. But within a year, we won a Voting Rights Act when things seemed most hopeless, but only because we organized at the ground. We showed up and we moved that into electoral power. I then returned to my campus in Chicago, and a friend of mine said his sister was pregnant and nearly suicidal and wanted an abortion. I hadn't really thought about the issue before, so I went to the medical arm of the civil rights movement. One movement is related to another, intersectional, before I even knew that word, and found a doctor, T.R.M. Howard, who had been a courageous civil rights leader in Mississippi till his name was on a Klan death list. He came to Chicago. He performed the abortion. I thought that that was one good deed, and all of our actions really should come out of love for other people. I say love at the center, and our moral beliefs that we want to help people. The procedure was successful, but then word spread. and someone else called. I arranged that procedure. Word spread and someone else called. And over time, as more people kept calling, I realized we had to set up a system. I brought in another provider whose name was Mike. I learned about what the system was that was really involved with it, so I could counsel the women and support them. And because 3 people talking about an abortion in Chicago in the 1960s was a conspiracy to commit a felony, we said, call Jane, and we called the system Jane. And over time, the women of Jane learned how to do the procedures and themselves performed 11,000 abortions before Roe. And we won Roe. We won at least a baseline of reproductive freedom, just a baseline, not full accessibility. We have further to go, but that was because we organized. And so the main lesson I learned, whether it was out of the civil rights movement, where we finally got Voting Rights Act, even facing terror, or out of an early women's movement, gaining the rights to reproductive freedom, at least a baseline, was that when we organize, we change this world. And that's what you are doing with Planned Parenthood, with Indivisible, with organizations around the country, with Sister Song, and with organizations we may not know the names of now, but we do know that when we organize with love at the center, we have changed this world and we will change this world.
Thank you so much for opening and sharing that with us, Heather. That was incredibly powerful. I'm going to be sitting with that for a little while. Kelly, we know that Planned Parenthood has been preparing for this moment for a long time, and that you have been right in the middle of a cross-movement effort to prepare and to take on the fights ahead. Could you talk to us a little bit about how you see some of those coming fights and where you are looking for folks like Indivisible leaders to support and throw in the ongoing battle?
Absolutely. And I gotta say, I gotta give another shout for Heather, for you, Leah. I'm gonna tell you, we could have ended the webinar after Heather just spoke, because I feel ready to go, ready to go outside and get this work done, because it's true. It's like organizing will save us, right? I'm reminded of that Dr. Cornel West quote, love is what justice looks, or justice is what love looks like in public. This is about loving each other enough to fight, to believe that we deserve more, and to do the work that's necessary to bring it to fruition, to make it our reality. And there's an incredibly sad moment in front of us, but also an opportunity. You know, I work at Planned Parenthood, like you said, Leah. My wife works in gun violence prevention at Everytown for Gun Safety. And then we also have this 10-month-old in the midst of a formula shortage, right? So between us, we say like we're at the epicenter of so many American crises that are happening right now. And I think for me, you know, I always start with the patient aspect first. And this moment that we're in is really devastating for a lot of folks. We're looking at 26 states who will soon ban abortion, 13 states who already have, 8 or 9 states are moving into special legislative session for the pure purpose of banning abortion access. And at the end of the day, in a couple of months, we'll be looking at 24 states that are doing the best that they can to expand access to not only care for folks in the states, in their state, but also to open the doors to other folks who are coming from out of state to get care. The math is not going to work. We are going to be in an environment where not everyone can get to the care that they need, where folks will have to look outside of the traditional medical system. Folks will have to learn more about self-managed abortion care. And unfortunately, we've already seen this in places like Texas. Some people will be forced to carry their pregnancies to term. This is a rough reality, and it's not about laws and policies or data. It's about real people's lives, their hopes and their dreams and their fears. And we have a lot to do. And the thing that I always think about every morning when I wake up is the person that's living in one of these states that discovers that they're pregnant and doesn't know what to do because abortion is no longer legal in their state. Or if you're in a place like Louisiana, it was legal 2 days ago and it's illegal today, and it may be legal again tomorrow. And in this environment, what our clinicians are having to do is call people every day to say, we can't schedule your appointment here anymore. We've got to figure out how to get you to care a different way. And we've got our patients that we're talking to that are already doing the math in their head, asking themselves, can I afford the gas to get out of state? Can I take the time off work? Is childcare available to me? And if not, what is it going to mean for me to have to carry this pregnancy to term? And not only that, what is it going to mean for me in a world where you still have things happening like Uvalde and like Highland Park? What does it mean for me to have to raise a child in an environment where I can't get formula and I can't make sure that they are safe? That is the core of reproductive justice. Not only being able to decide if and when to parent, but to raise that child free from violence. And we are failing on so many accounts as a nation for our people right now. So, when I think about this moment and Planned Parenthood strategy, there are a couple things that we're focused on. Number one is either getting people to care or getting care to people. So we've been working in a really integrated way with abortion funds across the country. Please support your local abortion funds, with Planned Parenthood healthcare providers, with independent providers, with practical support organizations that are helping people to figure out things like travel and gas and childcare to make sure that we are creating an integrated web of care across the country that isn't really about state lines. It's really about a regional model of making sure that folks get access to care. It's the reason why in Illinois is so important right now, because it's going to have to take care of Missouri and Iowa and all the states around it, right? That's the way we're kind of looking at the country. And then on the other end, we're ready to fight. This is not a battle that's over. This is the middle of a long story of us truly getting closer to reproductive freedom. Right now, the fight is happening state by state with a focus on those states that are going into special session. South Carolina started last week. Indiana, I think, will start in special session on the 25th. These are places where our voices, loud and amplified and multiplied, can make a difference. And even if we stop these bills for a day or two, that's hundreds of people that will maintain access to care. These are things that matter. And at the same time, we're not leaving out the federal landscape. Sure, there's nothing that the federal government can do right now to fix the problem, but there's sure a lot of stuff that they can do to help us to ameliorate it in the ways that they can. We're talking about things like encouraging the Biden administration to declare a public health emergency, encouraging the federal government to put millions and millions more dollars into all the ways that we can support access to care, even though the Hyde Amendment still currently exists. And we're also thinking about the appropriations fight, which, look, my indivisible folks, y'all know about appropriations more than just about any other activist I've met, but how that budget process can also be a tool for us to get folks access to care that they need, but even to also address things like maternal mortality in this country, paid family leave, and other issues that affect people and families when we think about the full trajectory. And then lastly, I have to say this, especially because I know Heather Booth and I are on the same page. Look, if we are truly going to get out of this, we have to win in 2022. The reason that we are in this position is because there's been a well-funded, singularly focused opposition that's done all that it could to distort the courts, to gerrymander the states, to suppress our voting rights in such a way that they could overpower the will of 80% of Americans that are with us on this issue. This is about power and control. It's not about healthcare at all. So we have to make sure that the power of the people truly comes to light in November. And we have to gain as much power as we can at the state level. I'm talking about state legislatures, I'm talking about governorships. And of course, at the federal level, we need 2 more good Senate seats and holding the House in order for us to truly pass some transformative policy.
Yay!
Absolutely.
How about everyone who's watching in? Give it up for Kelly Robinson and for the fight that we have ahead of us.
Absolutely. And I want to pick up on something that you were talking about in your comments. A lot of indivisible folks, we got involved because we were outraged about Donald Trump's election. We were outraged about the threat he posed to everything we held dear, and because it felt like fundamentally democracy itself was under attack. And it feels very clear right now that the struggle for reproductive freedom and the struggle for an inclusive democracy are tightly linked. And so I would love it if you could talk a little bit more about, what is that connection between the issues that we are fighting for there?
Heather, do you want to jump us off?
Sure, there's so many things that connect it. There are 3 that come to mind. One is that across our issues, we have a shared vision of a future that is inclusive, that is indivisible, that is treats all people with dignity and respect, that cares about our planet, that cares about that we have an air to breathe, that we feel safe walking down the street, that we are respected in our people. So we have a shared vision of our future that comes from, I believe, I say, we need love at the center. And so we're united on our vision and values. And by the way, 70 to 80% of the country agrees with us on all of that when we start with our vision and values and we start with love. Now, if you're making it ideological categories, people may differ. But if you say, do you believe that children should have the greatest opportunity? They should be learning about our history so that they know how to understand history and how to make history. Should people have enough to eat? Should there be a lower cost on prescription drugs? Should people be taken care of? Should we have adequate social security and decency in our old age? So there's unity on our vision, our values, and our moral beliefs. For the most part in this country, we should know we are the majority. The second is that our numbers are needed to make us the majority. Any one of us are remarkable in our own rights and our own movements, but it's together where we have the power to win. One may be strong in the suburbs, one may be strong in the cities, one may be strong in the rural areas, but together we can win. We need the areas led by BIPOC communities, by Black, Latino, Indigenous, Asian American. We need white people. We need men of goodwill. We need women. We need trans people. We need all people together. Together we are a majority. So that's the second point. The third is that we have a common enemy. And sometimes we are stronger when we know we're fighting a common enemy. I just heard about a week ago, Kelly probably knew this a long time ago, that it's the Koch brothers who've been one of the major funders of the anti-reproductive choice movement. The Koch brothers, I said, the Koch brothers, their industry is oil and energy. They want to destroy the environment, but reproductive freedom? And then I realized they care about two things. They want to elect people who are part of a MAGA right wing, whether they believe in that or not, because they want people who will undermine a climate and undermine paying taxes to even have a government to enforce any of these regulations. And so the Koch brothers are interested in undermining reproductive freedom. And so we are united by our vision and our values, by needing our majority, and by having a shared enemy. And as we have a shared enemy, we also need a shared unity to beat that shared enemy, to make our vision and values reflect the true majority that we are.
I hear, Heather, I am all the way with you. And what an inspiring thing. We need a shared unity that's as strong as our shared enemy. I think that that's such a beautiful sentiment. And that's intersectionality, right? And at the end of the day, our opposition totally understands intersectionality. A lot of times I want to say that it feels like right now our democracy is broken, but I think the more devastating thing is that our democracy is working the way that it was intended to, right? So that people that look like me and that look like you aren't really getting full stake into this country. And I think what we actually need to do is transform and reform it so that it is actually a representative democracy that's about us, that speaks to us and our interests. And I think their opposition is so terrified of that reality. I once had a preacher at the Unitarian church down the street, and she said the reason that that people that are holding power are so afraid right now is because they're concerned that when we, the majority, people that look like you and me, have power, that we will treat them as terribly as they've treated us over the last 400 years, right? And I think there is a lot that's happening here that is about fear and minority control. Let me just give you a few things. One, we know that there's a 50-50 split in the Senate, right? But we also know that the 50 Democratic senators represent 41.5 million more people, more humans than the 50 Republican senators, right? 41.5 million more people. That is huge. That means that there is not actually equal representation. The other thing I want to point out, when the decision came down, what we really saw was them saying the quiet part out loud. In Justice Thomas's dissent, he really made it plain. He made it clear that he does not believe that we are free and equal, and that most decisions that the courts have put out that allowed us to get a little bit closer to free should be revisited. Not only did he say that we needed to overturn Roe v. Wade and supported that, he also said, you know what? Let's take a look at Griswold, the decision that confirms our right to birth control. Let's take a look at Lawrence, the decision that makes it legal for you to decide who you want to be sexual partners with. Hey, let's also reconsider Abortifel, the decision that affirms same-sex marriage in this country. They are very clear that this is only the first overture in rolling back the rights that we've gained, not only the last 50 years, but the last hundreds of years. So I'm saying that because this is truly a crisis of our democracy, but if there is a silver lining, it's what Heather kind of started us off with. When you're at these moments of crisis, they have to create a moment of reckoning. And in a moment of reckoning, we can actually transform to something bigger and bolder than it ever was. So in so many ways, Roe was an important precedent, but it also wasn't serving us enough, because even with Roe in place, every year you had hundreds and hundreds of abortion restrictions put in place. We know that it wasn't doing what it needed to actually fortify access to abortion care for low-income folks, for Black and brown folks, for trans folks, for immigrants, for people with different ability levels, right? In the same way, our democracy, you know, it's been all right, but it has not been actually serving us in the way that we need. And I think the opportunity here that we have is that we're no longer bound to protect something that was never actually getting us all the way free in the way we needed to. We spent so much time defending and protecting Roe that we often didn't give ourselves the space that we needed to vision and really imagine what freedom could look like and should look like for all of us. And now we get the opportunity to do that, right? And we get the opportunity to figure out how to get there together in a world where really, I do think anything is possible if we're willing to organize.
100%, 100%. Well, one thing that I've heard coming up from a lot of Indivisibles and talking about kind of the strategy and how things have gone in the last few weeks, folks are really clear about taking the fight to MAGA Republicans, taking the fight to the extremists on the other side, making them answer for the sheer horror of the laws that they are putting in place and their predictable consequences. And they're also, you know, they're really clear, ultimately, we got to electrolyze this, right? We got to turn this into the biggest win we possibly can in November for, you know, because there is one party on the ballot that is really clear that it is coming for all of us. And so we have to fight back. One other thing we've heard from a lot of folks nationwide is the desire to see Democrats really show up and fight. And so I'm curious, what do you want to see, Kelly, this is really for you first, what do you want to see from elected leaders right now who are in the fight with us? What makes somebody a real fighter for reproductive freedom right now?
I want to see people going as hard as they possibly can and pushing and pulling every lever of power that they've got. And I think actually we've seen some bold examples of this, particularly at the state level, right? With Gretchen Whitmer, like she just declared, pushed forward an EO yesterday. Tony Evers in Wisconsin, right? Doing some big and transformative things. He called his state legislature back and said, come back right now from home or from the beach or wherever you are, from the Great Lakes, and pass something that will affirmatively protect access to care. And he didn't succeed, but it's going after things and being bold, even if you're not sure if you'll win. And I think everyone really has a role to play there. And I also think it's not limited to the elected sector. I mean, I think we have some serious work to do to hold governors accountable, especially in our state legislatures, because they can actually make a difference right now, and then build the power that we need to have a higher bar of what we are going to accept at the federal level. That stuff is very real. And at the same time, I also think, you know, Indivisible has been great at this. A lot of our movement partners have, thinking outside of the elected sector to make sure that there's no room for anyone to be on the sidelines. If you work at a company or corporation, they better be showing up to say what they're going to do. If you're thinking about going to a campus or a school in one of these banned states, that school better prove to you that they're going to do something to protect you, the students, and the staff and faculty on their campus as well. There are ways for us to do accountability in every sector to create an environment where no one is allowed to be neutral. There's the only space to be on the right side of history is to be bold and taking actions to protect access to care.
That's great. Heather, anything to add there? What do we want to see from people who are leading the fight?
You know, I want to, because I thought Kelly covered it so wonderfully. By the way, I just adore her. So glad, Leah, you arranged that we could actually be on this program together, because with COVID and some other things, we just don't see each other as much as we want to. But I want to complement what she said with what it is we need to do, because we really are the leaders that we need to move forward. Often we say, why the hell isn't Joe Manchin doing this or Sinema doing this? Or I wonder that too. But Joe Manchin said, if you want more liberals, elect more liberals. So what are we going to do? And there's at least 4 M's that I sometimes think about for what we need to do. 4 M's. Members, we need to recruit people right now. And I really do want people to go to, what's the name of your website? Let's see, givenoground.org. How many people will you sign up? How many will take shifts? How many will support driving for people for providers, the abortion centers in your states? How many will, but people, we've got to recruit people to make the calls, to do the texts, to do the door knocking, to show up at the demonstrations, but we need to recruit people. We need members. M. Secondly, we need the message. What are we going to say? Will we take the messages that that Kelly has so often provided us, and that Indivisible so often provides us? Is it on social media? Is it op-eds? It is in talks like this. In fact, the messages that Kelly has said, I wrote down things she said, getting people to care and getting care to people. They're messages that we're giving out. We hope you'll magnify it. So what's the message, and how many ways will you magnify that message? Money. This movement takes money. Planned Parenthood, people say, oh, it's got so much money. I actually don't know its situation currently, but a center that was dealing with perhaps 500 cases, 500 clients, people who came through in a week, now have 1,000, or maybe if it's even more than that. And how do they get funded? We can provide funding. Maybe we can only give $10 or $15, so some can give much more who are on, but how much will we raise? So it's what will we do? And the fourth is movement. Will we show up when there's a call to action? And there are going to be so many events. What happens when the first person is arrested? What happens when the first person is given $10,000 in Texas for informing on a neighbor or a friend with a bounty system? We better show up. And so it's members, message, money, and movement. And with that in mind, and just this point of that it's up to us to do the work to show up, I wanted to, well, Kelly was talking, I thought about a phrase that was often said in the movement and how I now apply it. In the civil rights movement, people sometimes would say to each other, are you willing to die for freedom? And I very much wanted to live, but I was willing to take that risk if that's what was needed. But I think now there's at least as great a question. And that is, are you willing to live for freedom? Are you willing to do the work every day and say, when it's too hot or it's too cold or I'm too tired or I'm too bored or one more phone call, will you show up every day and do the work? And I think when we organize, we provide the leadership that we will need. And it stops us from just finding reasons why we can't move ahead because other people are in the way. We have to create the leadership. It's in our hands. We've done it before. I actually believe we will do it again.
Incredible. And I swear we did not plan this in advance, but it's also a really great advertisement for the next session that we have after this, which is recruitment working groups. So we're going to dive in on our strategy on exactly how you get one of those 4Ms members right after this. So thank you. I actually want to also pivot off of that. So a lot of Indivisible's the folks who are joining us tonight, like they are leaders of groups, they are managing communities on their home turf. They're often seeking inspiration for themselves, and they're also often thinking about how do they inspire and keep other people in the fight. So I'm curious, what would you say, to people who are leading around the country and who are holding up communities and keeping them engaged? What advice would you give, and what do you think that they should be saying or sharing with their own members?
Mm. Ooh, that hit me in my soul, Heather, when you said, are you willing to live for freedom? So I would say that. That is huge. And I also think so much of this is really about our stories. And I think the more that people can share their stories about why this matters, the better. And your story, it doesn't have to be something like, it doesn't have to be something Viola Davis would perform and win an Emmy, right? Like, your story is your own. It doesn't have to be dramatic or scary either. And when we're talking about our stories, yes, I'm talking about abortion stories. There's so much that we need to do to tell that narrative and to also destigmatize it. But even if you don't have an abortion story, talking about how these issues have impacted you and your life, talking about bodily autonomy, talking about freedom, these are things that we've got to be able to have stories about that allow us to connect to one another and to find a shared vision in the fight, not only a shared villain, but a shared vision together. And I think one of the things that Heather also said that's really kind of sticking with me in this moment is that, after we tell our stories, we've got to have a strategy that we're going to engage folks in. I know Leah and Indivisible have that. There's so much work to do, especially as we look ahead to recess, we look ahead to 2022, we look to the accountability we've got to do in the states. And then I think it's also about reminding ourselves that we can win. As progressives, so often we talk about all the things that we've gotten wrong and all the ways that we failed, and all the things that, we weren't progressive enough. We also got to talk about the stories of victory where we saw ourselves win and remember what that feels like in our bones. Somebody's reminded me lately of that adage that hope is a discipline, and we've got to work at it every single day. And in this moment, things are tough. They are hard. We can't ignore that reality. But also, to Heather's point, when we look at the history, there's a brighter something on the other side of that horizon, right? Like, you don't get to breakthroughs in the HIV/AIDS crisis without going through ACT UP. You don't get to the Civil Rights Act without going through Selma. We're going to go through something together, but it's actually going to open up greater possibilities when we are able to do it, when we maintain hope as a discipline, when we vision together, and when we love each other enough to stay in the fight, to love each other enough to continue fighting and living to get to another level of freedom. There's a lot of opportunity here. And I think by finding in community, we can do so much together.
I love you, Kelly. I want to reinforce what Kelly said. Maybe I'm finding my words to say exactly what she said. I'm glad to follow her lead. There are two big themes. There were things that Kelly said I wanted to reinforce. One was the having love and caring for ourselves. I want to build on that. And the other was that we can win. And more than that, I think the tide is turning and we are starting to win, but we don't know it yet. So on the first point, I have two watchwords that I often use, or two themes. One is, if we organize, we can change the world. I've already said that. I believe that. Only if we organize can we change the world for all people. And the other is to do it with love at the center. And that what I'd advise people is to love for yourself, love for our community, love for your groups. You asked about the indivisible groups, love for them, and love for the community. When I was the Progressive and Seniors Outreach Director for the Biden-Harris campaign, and I had about 8,000 volunteers in our unit. We had 250 people who were almost full-time. And I made buttons for them because they had volunteers working almost full-time, 250. And at the end of each night, or every time we briefed each other, again, this was all on Zoom, I'd say, and I made buttons saying the two phrases, that if we organize, we can change the world. So do you see this button? It says organize Biden-Harris. These are original buttons. And the other one says, but with love at the center, Biden-Harris. And so I'm partly using this proof to say, see, I've been saying it for a long time. Though Kelly brought it out. I realized when she said it, I wanted to reinforce it. And that's partly what I think is important. We want to do this for the long run. I started this work, personally, I was about 13 or 14 for the first flyer I ever handed out. I'm now 76. I'll be 77 this year if I make it. It's now time for a new generation, but we'll work together. But it's in it for the long haul with love at the center and organizing. The other thing I wanted to reinforce, and Kelly is so smart, she said, because we can win, winning matters. Protesting matters, demonstrating matters, wearing my pussy hat, showing that we care. I'm for all of it. But winning matters, to change people's lives, to improve things, to change the relations of power. And I was just looking for it and I didn't have the final figures here. Leah may have them. I had a readout on the key races, and the Democrats are now in the rise. So I wanted to say that the election is moved. This is a culmination. You know, people are feeling dispirited. Many are feeling dispirited, partly because there's such an assault on us, and partly because the Fox News and others tell us you're up against it. And also life is hard. There's inflation. There's tired of COVID. But here's how the politics are going, because the giant has been awakened. You have been awakened, in part because the anti-MAGA majority has been awakened, in part because of these Supreme Court decisions, in part because the horror of these gun shootings that have happened, in part because hearing the January 6th hearings, this criminal conspiracy attacking our country. The election has moved 3 to 5 points towards Democrats. The GOP brand has taken a major hit. The Senate is now leading Democratic. And if you think about this as, do we like the conditions now as a referendum? Do you like what we're facing? The answer is no, we don't like it. We like all the leadership we have. I wish some things were different. But if it's a choice, is it Fetterman or phony Dr. Oz, who's probably registered in New Jersey and has what, 5 houses, 9 houses with the millionaires, but Fetterman is of the people. If you ask that, Fetterman is up. If you at Mastriano, who's running, this is in Pennsylvania, that's for Senate. In governor, Mastriano was part of the January 6th conspiracy, criminal conspiracy on this country. Are you for him, or are you for a wonderful candidate that we have for governor? Is Stacey Abrams, are you for her? You know, are you for, or Warnock for Senate? Are you for him, or are you for someone who may tragically really not have his right senses? He can't tell truth from fiction. He says he was at the top of his class in college. He may not have graduated from college. He says fathers should take care of their kids. He's now had to acknowledge 2 kids he never acknowledged before. I mean, when you compare it, we can win, but only if we take heart, believe in ourselves with love at the center, and do the work and organize.
I love, Heather, can I add too, when you're talking about the conditions are ripe for changing, the Supreme Court. People don't have the faith in the Supreme Court because they don't believe that it's actually a democratic institution anymore. That wasn't true prior to 2018, right? Ever since then, you've seen a steady decline. People are aware that some of the institutions we've taken for granted in this country are not actually serving us. These are the conditions that we need to actually make a change.
Absolutely, 100%. And I think we've seen that, you know, even just in the time since we as Indivisible started organizing, since 2016, 2017, you know, the stolen seat.
Direct correlation, Leah.
Exactly. I mean, and, you know, many like folks were here, were part of the fight on Kavanaugh, part of the fight on Amy Coney Barrett. We all knew the stakes all along. And, you know, while we might have known the stakes, while we might have intellectually been prepared for this moment, that doesn't mean that it's not still something that we're just grappling with every day at this point. I want to make sure to open it up to questions. And if folks have questions for our speakers, please go ahead and pop them in the chat box. I'm going to ask one last version or one last one of mine, which is, what are you excited about for the 2022 midterms?
That's for us.
Yes, for you. And then
I'm
and
excited
other
about
folks maybe
winning.
ask some questions.
I'm
Yes,
excited
so
about
winning.
because, we come into 2022, and of course, traditional political wisdom says that the president's party is going to lose, right? Like that's the assumption that people in DC make. And I'm here to say, like, it is going to be patently false, because this is going to be an election where we hold the House, we make some gains in the Senate, and we do some incredible work at the state level because people know exactly what's at stake. And I think that if we're in a moment where we're going to defy the odds and do something transformative, that's going to be 2022. I also think, to Heather's point, we have been looking at measuring the Democratic candidates against a generic Republican ticket, and they've been, neck and neck. When they start to replace that generic Republican with the actual candidate, like a Mastriano who's wild, like Herschel Walker, who's, who knows what he's ever talking about. Now we're having a real race between two actual humans, and the decision is clear because it is so clear how far out of touch they are with voters. So I think this is going to be an exciting election year to get people engaged. I also think it's going to be a meaningful one where organizing and this person-to-person relational engagement is going to be the difference maker, because we need people not to just vote for Democrats, but to vote for transformation, to, through the electoral work, establish a level of accountability to us as constituents and as people that will force them to behave differently and more boldly when we get them into office. That, to me, is an exciting prospect for 2022.
I love it. I also, one of the things I'm excited about is some of the names that I see in the chat box. I think these are old friends or young friends or people I see in other places. I saw Michelle Fowl, other indivisibles, Lenny Hoppenworth, Martha Shockley, Patty Crane. Anyway, the Susan Morgan, the names keep going on and on, but they're people who are from Indivisible. I saw Bill Dempsey in the file. People who have been given life commitment to organizing and are just great movement partners. And together, in fact, I'd even say the following. You may not believe it. Many people tell me they don't believe it. I'm actually very insecure as a person. I honestly am. I was nervous. I was going to appear on the same stage as Kelly Robinson. I cheer her when I see her on the stage. Oh my God, I'm going to be on with Kelly. What am I going to do? And what will Leah say? And we beat up ourselves all the time. But together, we find our strength. Together, we will make it happen. And so I'm excited about the power that we will all have when together we do the work, and then we can celebrate our victories together. But we've got to have, we all also have to be agents of hope. We have to convey this sense. We can do it in a period in which so many are dispirited and the opposition wants us dispirited. And part of our goal is to say we can do it when we organize with love at the center.
That's great. That is a refrain that is going to stick with me. All right, I saw one question in the chat box about the Roe decision and engaging youth voters, young people who we know are really make or break for 2022. Do you have insights, thoughts, advice for folks who are thinking about how do we use this moment of outrage to engage young voters?
Yes, is my answer. And I would also say, like, young people are organizing, right? Like, young people have always been at the forefront of every social movement. So as much as it's about engaging young voters, it's also about giving young voters and youth communities the resources that they need to do their work more effectively and to scale and with the support that they need to be as successful as possible. But I think in this moment, we can truly change the nature of politics in this country when we expand the electorate. By that, I mean engaging young people, I mean engaging folks of color, not just in the last couple of weeks, but early on, and doing all that we can to make sure that we're fighting back against voter suppression in these states. Again, we got to remember that especially for young folks, for folks of color, for women, also this applies. The way that they've set up the rules is to try to disenfranchise us. We have to do extra work to engage our communities to make sure that we're breaking through those barriers and having a transformative impact. But when we do that, we are going to see some incredible outcomes, but it does require a deeper investment and also kind of creating the space in movement circles and in spaces like this for us to follow their leadership.
I saw a poll recently that said It was, what were the major reasons that young people were not voting? First of all, young people, just as Kelly said, we're all united on the issues, on the substance. In fact, even more so. You know, who believes there should be a pathway to citizenship? Who believes there should be marriage equality? It's like, it's not even a question. Who believes there should be, you name it, the items that we believe would be part of a better world. Young people are certainly in the lead, overwhelmingly. But the reasons young people are often not voting and are disengaged, the highest reason is that they didn't know how to do it. And they were unsure. Now, I was actually surprised by that. I'll tell you other reasons that I thought were the reasons. But so engage, part of the work is saying, here's how you register. If you're in a state that needs a voter ID, though we think that that's an abuse of voting, here's how you get a voter ID. There's a group called Vote Riders that can provide that information free for anyone who's interested. Here are drop boxes, if they don't allow drop boxes. And then they didn't know, well, who are the candidates? What should I do? And they want a discussion. You don't want to be told. But so the lack of information, and partly it's engaging people then in those conversations. There is also a question if they didn't know that it mattered to them. That was not the top reason. It's about the 8th reason on the list. They weren't sure it related to them. And so that's where organizing comes in. We need to connect with people and how the elections impact their lives. And because when I say that it is now 1 in 5 people who can have a child will look for an abortion now. I mean, would have an abortion. That's a large number. And so what do you do with that? How could you make a difference? What does it mean for them? And the same on sensible gun laws, outlawing these military weapons on the street. So it's organizing.
That's great. And that sort of segues into my last question. This is a panel with just 2 of the most spectacular organizers in the country. And so I want to ask you to give advice to our folks who are all themselves organizers, who are developing and honing their own skills. What helped you in your journey? What, are there things that you would advise that they read, they learn, they try to do? What would you talk to, if you're talking to folks who are thinking about how do they continue to take it to the next level as organizers, what would you say?
Heather, I got to let you close this out, so I'm going to go first. One, I mean, how did I learn? I learned through Midwest Academy and Heather Booth. And there are so many ways to learn about organizing and the mechanics and the structures of it from those types of trainings. And, Indivisible's got workshops and books like that, but use the resources that you have around you. The other thing that I think has been really important to me is to trust your gut. Nobody knows your community better than you do. Trust yourself, trust your gut, trust the people that are around you, and know that when you trust each other enough, when you're invested enough, all that is organizing. That is movement building. That is a power building that will build deep interconnections that we need in order to win. And I also want to think about, when I talk about winning, I'm not talking about winning for some of us. I'm talking about winning for all of us. We have to be thinking about who are the people that are at the margins of our lives and make sure they are at the center of the way that we build power. And I don't care where you are. Maybe you're in an all-white community, right? And you're like, everybody looks kind of like me. Well, I guarantee you there's a margin there. Maybe it's about ability, right? Where people that are differently able are at the margins. Or maybe it's about money, where people with lower income are at the margins. Figure out how to bring them into the center. If you're in an environment where you're with all Black folks, hey, I guess what? Maybe some of the first and second, maybe some of the first generation folks feel like they're at the margins. Bring them into the center. The Harvard Business Review has a great article called the curb cutout theory. And it's this idea, it's really about the movement by the disability rights community for curb cutouts, right? How you get up onto the sidewalk. Now, what they found was in the curb cutout theory was that it was made it was pushed forward for people who needed it for ability and access to get on the sidewalk for things like wheelchair usage. However, the benefit is across the board, how we benefit from it when you're carrying your luggage somewhere or when you're pushing your stroller around. When you center people that are most impacted, it has a ripple effect that affects so many different communities. So figure out how to do that, figure out how to trust your gut, and whatever you do, don't stop organizing.
I'm just smiling a lot because as somebody who also has a stroller that I tote around a lot, I think about the curb cut effect quite a bit. Heather, how about you?
First, I say amen, or I say a women to everything that Kelly just said. 3 thoughts on how to survive and do this for the long haul. As I said, I started when I was a young teenager. I often was the youngest in the room. I'm now often the oldest in the room. And I look for that partnership with younger people who'll carry it forward. 3 thoughts for staying in this for the rest of your life. 1 is do what you find joy in doing. I find joy in doing this work. I've tried other things. I love being on this call with Leah and Kelly and being part of an indivisible population. But I'm also, just to find joy, I schedule my time in. I'm in 2 book clubs. One I was in, it's a women's book club, and then my husband wanted to be in one, so we decided to go into one together. I'm in 3 different theater groups. It means once a month I can go out with friends to see different plays. I actually take time with my grandkids so do things, whatever it is, soccer, reading, doing nothing, watching TV, whatever it is. Do the things you find joy in doing and make sure you allow yourself that joy. 2, ensure that the organizations support healthy growth and provide love at the center. It means decent wages, hours, working conditions, paid leave. It means supporting each other, listening to each other, not calling in and not calling out, not circular firing squads. By the way, particularly now, when there's a lot to criticize, it's not great in some ways. We wish things were different. And when you feel you're losing, it's easy to turn on each other, but it's precisely then that leaders pull each other together, say how strong we are, never lying. I try to only say things I think are true, and drive forward for what we can do together. So have the joy personally, the culture of the organization, and the third is I really reinforce what Kelly said, which is you need a sense of a strategic plan for how your actions will lead to winning. If all you're doing is tweeting, but you don't know where it will go to, it may be a good tactic, but how do you end up with a final game? If all you're doing is showing up, if all you're doing is voting, it's not one thing. What's the strategy unified for how we win, to improve lives, give people a sense of their own power, and change the relations of power? And when we organize with love at the center, we have changed this world, and we will change this world. And Leah, thanks for inviting us in on this call. All of you who've been watching, thanks for taking this message on in your own words and doing the work every day to live for freedom and justice and building a better democracy.
Thank you. Thank you both so much. I know folks are inspired, energized, and so appreciative of you being here with us tonight. We are going to go, so thank you again. Folks, we are going to go straight into our next session. So if you head to the lobby, you can find the recruitment working groups. We are super excited to hone our skills and to talk all things recruitment. So see you there.